Well, welcome back to the Daily Dose of Philippians. I'm Pastor Ray. Today we have a special guest who dropped by. I don't get a lot of visitors because of social distancing these days, but today we have Jonathan Hernandez. Those of you from our church know him very well, super involved in our church, and we thank God for him. Jonathan serves as my pastoral intern, and so he works with me and he's training, and one day he's planning to be a pastor. So we're thankful for Jonathan. And today, as I'm filming this on Tuesday, April the 14th. It's Jonathan's birthday. So thankful to have Jonathan here. Jonathan? All right. Hey, Jonathan, what do you think about the Daily Dose?
It's pretty good. It's very helpful for my spiritual life.
Just pretty good?
Awesome.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, that's better. That's better. What would you recommend for people to do in the middle of quarantine to keep busy and to keep the walk with the Lord good?
Read your Bibles. Take a rest.
Yeah. Anything for fun or recreation?
Pastor told me to watch Star Wars, and I should watch it.
Yes, you should.
I want to share that Pastor forgot my birthday today. So.
Ah!
Yeah, just joking. Yeah. Yeah. Pastor is a blessing to me today.
All right. Well, we're recording this on Jonathan's birthday, so happy birthday to Jonathan. Today we're recording this on Tuesday, April the 14th, but that is Jonathan's birthday. So everyone wish him a late happy birthday.
Thank you, Pastor. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Yeah.
Today we move on to Philippians chapter 3, beginning with verse 1. Finally, my brothers, rejoice in the Lord. To write the same things to you is no trouble to me and is safe for you. Look out for the dogs, look out for the evildoers, look out for those who mutilate the flesh. For we are the circumcision who worship by the Spirit of God and glory in Christ Jesus, and put no confidence in the flesh. Though I myself have reason for confidence in the flesh also. If anyone else thinks he has reason for confidence in the flesh, I have more. All right, let's take a look. So Paul begins here, chapter 3, with finally. Now what's going on here is this is sort of as a result of what has been said before. This doesn't mean that Paul is closing the letter, but as a result of what we've seen in chapters 1 and chapter 2. So the Philippian believers are to take their joy in the Lord, and this is sort of an antidote for the unity problems and sort of the humility that Paul is bringing up. They're to take their joy in the Lord. And he says, to write the same things to you is no trouble to me and is safe for you. So Paul has been talking about rejoicing in the Lord. He's been talking about how he rejoices in the Philippians and in their true faith. And so Paul is sort of repeating, and he says, to write the same things to you is of no trouble to me. In other words, I've written and I've rehearsed this idea of rejoicing in the Lord. And he says, to repeat myself, in other words, he says, is no burden to me. He says, and actually, he says, it's safe for you. In other words, it's good for you to hear the same thing over and over. The old saying, repetition is the mother of learning. So Paul really wants them to get that the Lord is to be the subject or the object of their rejoicing. Then he says, look out for the dogs. Look out for the evildoers. Look out for those who mutilate the flesh. Now, we're just talking about the same group of people here. So that's kind of what Paul is doing, sort of a parallelism. The dogs, the evildoers, those who mutilate the flesh. Now, who is this? Well, we get a little clue when we go down to verse 3. For we are the circumcision, who worship by the Spirit of God, glory in Christ Jesus, and put no confidence in the flesh. Paul's addressing false teachers here. Now, we should understand these as distinct from the people in chapter 1 who are preaching Christ. Okay? We should understand them as distinct. Paul talks about those in chapter 1 who were preaching Christ, and some of them were preaching out of envy and strife, but he rejoiced that they were preaching. Now, that's not the case with these false teachers. They're different. So what's going on here? He calls them dogs. You might say, wow, that's harsh. He calls them evildoers, and he says they are those who mutilate the flesh. Now, what we're looking at is people who were teaching that circumcision was necessary for salvation. So it didn't take long. In Acts 15, you read about some of these people, and they were saying, if you want to be saved, even if you're a Gentile, you've got to be circumcised, just as God commanded in the Old Testament. Now, this sort of gets at an ages-old debate. How should New Testament believers relate to the Old Testament and some of its commands especially? Now, we don't have time to go into that today, but just be aware that some people disagree on various aspects of that. But one thing we have to absolutely get right is that salvation is by faith alone and by grace alone. And so salvation is of grace and not works. And we cannot add works. We can't add law keeping, and we can't add circumcision to salvation. So these people are mutilating the flesh. Paul's referring to circumcision as mutilation, and he calls them dogs and evildoers. Now, dogs here is not just some sort of an insult, like we might think of it, but dogs was a term that was used a lot in Jewish vocabulary to refer to Gentiles. You might remember that Jesus refers to the woman, the Canaanite woman, and when she wants Jesus to heal her daughter, and he says, well, it's not fitting and it's not good to take the children's bread, referring to the people of Israel, and to cast it to dogs. You find that story in Matthew 15:21. Jesus isn't just insulting her with no base, but this was a term to use of Gentiles, outsiders. They're evildoers. But what the irony of this is, these people, if they're not Jewish, they are Judaizers, and they're most likely Jewish. And Paul is referring to these Jewish folks in terms of Gentiles. But then he refers to the Philippian church, which would have been largely Gentile, as the circumcision. So he's referring to Gentile Christians as true Jews, and he's referring to Jews who insisted on circumcision as Gentiles. He's showing a great reversal in God's economy of salvation. Not necessarily a reversal, probably just an unveiling of the true nature of it, but it's a reversal certainly of the way it had been thought about. And we are the true circumcision who worship by the Spirit of God and glory in Christ. So if you want to be a true law keeper, you're going to do it by the Spirit of God, and you're going to glory in Christ Jesus and put no confidence in the flesh, for circumcision in the flesh avails nothing. Paul talks about that pretty clearly in Romans chapter 2. In Romans chapter 2, he talks about the fact that circumcision is inward and it's not outward. All right, he says, now concluding, and this leads to the next section, though I myself have reason for confidence in the flesh also, if anyone else thinks he has reason for confidence in the flesh, I have more. And we'll come back next time in verse 4 and find out what Paul's talking about. He's sort of pulling rank here. He says these people who think they have reason to glory in their circumcision, he says, even though I'm not doing it, he says, I have a more impressive resume than they do. So we'll see what Paul means by that when we come back next time.
Well, thanks again for watching. Hope you were blessed by today's video. Share this with your friends. Give me a comment. Let me know what you're learning. And I'll see you again next time on The Daily Dose.